Mark Greene, welcome to Making Disciples from LICC. Tell us exactly what you do for LIC in a little snapshot for those that don't know you.
Well, what we try to do is to help people live out their whole life with God, Monday through Saturday as well as Sunday, see how God loves to relate to them, empower them, whether they're at the school gate, whether they're in a uni hall, whether they're traveling on the bus, wherever they are, who they're with. And we try to help church leaders help folk do that.
Yeah. And so I guess that's what I want to talk to you about today. So much of this.
That's convenient.
Yeah. So much of discipleship in the church seems to me to be done in these four walls. And we talk about discipleship as something that happens here, when actually the reality is that Jesus did it on the streets, it was in the highways, it was in people's homes. Discipleship happened, what I would say, is the Monday to Saturday. It was in the Monday to Saturday Jesus did the discipleship stuff. And we somehow have swung it to make it all about this building and this place that we've got. How do we move discipleship essentially back to what is our front line? And I love that phrase, front line. It's a word that the LICC use a lot. But our life is lived on front lines. How do we move our discipleship, would you say, back to our front line?
I guess so. One of the things is just to recognize that we're always disciples wherever we are, whether we're in a bus queue or in a supermarket queue or in the office or a school gate with our kids. We're always God's precious son or precious daughter. His spirit is always living in us. He doesn't sort of get to the office door and say, see you later at the prayer meeting.
Yeah.
And I think that means that God always wants to relate to us. And so as you say about Jesus being a disciple maker, he's the master disciple maker.
Yeah.
So I think he does disciple us in churches, by the way. I think he does disciple us in home groups, and he does disciple us through communion and all the things that we do together as people of God, vitally so. But I don't think he wastes anything. So I think he's as likely to teach me about humility when my boss told me that was an arrogant statement to make in a meeting. True story, if you like, as he might be when I'm reflecting on Proverbs. He's as likely to teach me about honoring him through honouring a difficult boss as he is when I'm actually in a church service where I've been called on to honour him as the King of Glory. He's as likely to teach me about ministering grace and truth as, if you like, when you're at the school gate, you can't wait to get rid of your kids and you feel the Holy Spirit prompting you. There's somebody over there. Well, you don't really know them, but you can tell. Just go up to them. Just be kind, something. So I think he's always discipling us. And I think one of the ways that we move back is just to be conscious that could be the case. Maybe Jesus has been teaching me today something that he wants me to be aware of. He wants me to grow in.
Yeah.
And I suppose practically, historically, I mean, you are the great spiritual guru on this, if you can have Christian gurus. But that whole sense of reflecting on our day and then just for a moment, sometimes pausing, where was God? And often that is such a helpful trigger for people. I suppose it probably was that. I suppose I was patient. 10 years ago, I shot them.
Yeah.
So
do you think, just looking back in history, was there a time when we as the church were better at associating our discipleship with the Monday to Saturday than we do now? Do you think there was a time when it was more so discipleship in the world?
Well, there's always been some humans who've just kind of got it. Some disciples who've just got it, and there are today. I think that time where you could probably point to it as a kind of movement was during the Wesley Revival.
Yeah.
That was a lot to do with, it wasn't just that he preached the gospel. He had this framework for disciple making. And that was the big difference, I think, between him and many other movements that we've seen in the church. So, what he introduced, as you know, is he wanted people to come to services. Yes, absolutely, to worship God together, to be a people together. But he also had a thing called a class where he taught people.
Yeah.
And we're kind of, the notion of adult Sunday school class, well, we're not going to do that, are we? Not Brits, but they do it a lot in America. And then he had a thing called a band.
Yeah.
And these bands weren't just little groups that got together, and which is good, and prayed together. You asked each other tough questions. You got to a place where, so what is your besetting sin? What are you tempted by? Is this expressing yourself in your daily life? And the big phrase from the time was inner and outer holiness. And in the sense that your inner life should express itself, your outer life. So if you're following Jesus, then, and you want to do things for the master, then you don't sweep the dust under the carpet. You stick it in the dustpan and put it in the bin, whatever. So I think that period of time, the Methodist revival really was very strong. And some people actually believe that that was the key to the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Suddenly we had all these people who were more skilled, who were turning up for work on time, who did stuff, the rise of honesty and integrity of the nation.
I love that phrase, the inner, what was it, the inner and outer holiness.
Yeah.
I love that phrase. And where did that come from again?
Well, it came from Wesley, but where he got it from, I don't know. And of course, it's dangerous because outer holiness can sound superficial. Yeah. But for him, it was out of this. Yeah. It should express itself in places. Yeah. And I think what he was good at in his disciple making, if you like, was naming those places. Yeah. Well, turn up on time.
Well, if you see holiness as a holy antiseptic, the sense that holiness isn't something we defend, it's something that brings transformation, then actually external holiness in our workplace or with our families is about bringing this holy antiseptic into these places to bring about kingdom change. I think it's a lovely image. It's about something that God's doing through us, not necessarily everything that we do, but what God can do through us by our very presence in the workplace.
I do think that's right. I mean, there is the proactivity, but and you can see it in I don't think this is trivial, but you can see it in what you might call small ways that can be celebrated. I had when I was working in advertising, there was a guy who came, and his very junior guy called Ted Cobden. He was like 21, 22, and he was the son of a vicar, a minister. Yeah. And he was a lovely young man, actually. And for some reason, he never said anything, but nobody ever swore around him. Yeah. I mean, he never said anything. He was not holier than thou. He never frowned at people. But for some reason, I mean, it wasn't a particularly sweary place, but even what you might call mild swear words. Yeah. Which, of course, on a blog like this, I'm not allowed to use or wouldn't use, but, didn't happen. Yeah. Somehow he created this atmosphere. Or sometimes that can feel oppressive. People feel, I can't say anything around you, and I can't say this, and they feel diminished. They can't express themselves. But it wasn't like that with Ted. I think people were just as joyous. It's just that somehow they unconsciously didn't use those words. Well,
there's a difference between religious oppression and a holy antiseptic. Some people can carry that same awe, but actually it's an oppressive religious thing. Others carry something so beautiful that it actually brings about glory in the place. And there's a difference, isn't there?
Yeah, I think that's good. That's helped me see that, actually. That's helped me see what's going on there. There are people like that, aren't there? There's light in them. There's light in them.
Have you seen somebody practically who's been able to move their faith in such a way that they see their faith in their discipleship as something that's lived out on that Monday to Saturday, and it's started to affect the rugby club they go to or the workplace that they find themselves in, or how they work in that place? Practical example of somebody who's gone, hang on, it's not just about the Sunday, although this is a place, the Sunday is the pit stop that I get replenished. Yeah, it's about getting back on the. Can you give us a good example of that?
Well, I can probably give you lots of examples.
Let's do it. No, well, this is I want practical examples. So tell us about these, the different examples.
They come in different scales, and I think one of the things to be aware of is that often people are doing this, but they don't know it. Yeah, and they're not conscious of it, and because they're not conscious of it, they're not so confident in it. So let me just give you one example of somebody who wasn't conscious. Yeah. And then maybe an example of somebody who was. Great. I mean, I've got loads of it, but so. This guy happens to be a policeman, and we were in a room with 15 people, all men. It was a men's group, so that's why there were all men there. And the bloke who was leading this kind of evening sort of said he worked for telecoms, and he said, so what are you good at in the Lord at work? It's a kind of rather jargony phrase. And of course, because it was 15 men, I don't know, 30 to 50 the age or whatever it was, no one said anything. These are Southern English people. no one's going to say I'm good at something in front of anybody else. But I think he'd anticipated this because he had all these post-it notes on the table in front of us. So why don't you write something down? So we all wrote something down.
Yeah.
And then he said, clever man, well, since you've written it down, you might as well speak it out. Anyway, so this guy, who I'm calling Richard, it's not his name.
Yeah.
But sometimes I can use the real name, sometimes I can't. And obviously he's a policeman, so I can't use the real name. Anyway, Richard said, and he was looking down at the table in a very quiet way. This was not boom.
Yeah.
He was kind of looking down like this, and I'll do it if you like the way he did it. He said, well, I'm a policeman, as most of you know. I'm in armed protection. So he's got our attention. This is a group of guns, armed protection. Actually, I protect the Prime Minister at number 10. And he's still looking down at the coffee table. He's just looking down at the ground. And he said, it's a pretty macho team. And I'm thinking, probably. These people who are prepared to kill and, got Kevlar on and they're all that stuff.
Yeah.
And he said, over the years, there's been quite a lot of conflict. And I've found over the years that I'm quite good at bringing people back together. And he just kind of carries on looking down. And there's this awkward silence because we've never done this before. And then somebody says, you've got a ministry of reconciliation. And then somebody else said, you're a peacemaker.
Yeah.
And his face goes this huge smile. He suddenly realizes, oh, yeah. I've been doing this actually probably amazing thing. He's teaching people the ways of Jesus' forgiving at number 10 Downing Street. And by the way, in apparently high performance, high pressure teams where lives are on the line, high levels of trust are absolutely critical to high performance. They know this. In other words, if you don't believe that the person next to you is going to do what they need to do, if there's a smidgen of doubt in team performance, that's the nanosecond that means somebody gets killed.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point was suddenly he's realized. And it's because somebody else named it for him with a biblical category. Yeah. He was always doing it. But, so now he's confident. And that's what we often see. Suddenly, I've been fruitful. Oh, God has been. Well, maybe he can do some more. Oh, maybe I'm not a second-class citizen. Yeah. Maybe I'm not such a rubbish Christian that I thought I was. And in some way, and I love the church, I don't mean this to diminish it. So I don't need to go back and do street pastors, or I don't need to go back and be part of the food bank or the creche in order to do something beautiful for God. Because most of us want to do something for beautiful God. We may still do that, but it's not the only thing we can do that's beautiful for God. Yeah. So he wasn't conscious really of what he was doing. And often people aren't, I find, they don't know. But when they suddenly see it. So here's a guy, and sorry, these two examples happen to be men. I'll give you some female examples in a moment because there's no gender block in any of this really. And this guy was working in a big bank. I mean, you know some of these people because you live in the city. This particular one was toxic. Yeah. Still is. And he was in a particularly difficult team. He was about 55. He was brought in to help a younger man who was brilliant but not doing very well. And their performance numbers commercially and their performance numbers in terms of engagement were really going through the roof. I mean, going through the floor. Yeah. And this guy said, well, come in, restructure the place and get rid of this guy. And my friend, we'll call him Richard, is thinking, first of all, I don't know enough to restructure it yet because I don't know the people. So he told his boss that. And secondly, he's thinking, why have you told me to get rid of somebody? Why? So what he does about 6 weeks, he tells them I'm not going to restructure straight away because I don't think that's the right thing to do till I know what people can do. So he has this habit of a certain amount of time, and when he gets to him, he invites anybody to come and talk to him for half an hour about anything at all. Come and talk to me about your marriage, your football, fashion. I don't care. It's your half hour. Use it anyway. Your career, use it any way you like. God, doesn't matter. So this guy comes in and tells him, well, I went for your job and I went for the boss's job. So suddenly the guy's thinking that's why he wants rid of him, Yeah. And I didn't get either of them. And I was divorced this year. And suddenly you've got a 40-year-old banker in a major bank in tears in someone's office, which already tells you about the kind of guy that Richard is, that he's created this cocoon of trust and safety. So he listened to this guy and said, I think this is a quality individual. So he says to him, "Well, let's work out why you didn't get those two jobs. Let's work to getting those two jobs. Let's develop a plan." And so he didn't restructure him out. And there's several examples like that. What happened about 6 months later, I met up with him again. He said, "It's amazing. What's happened in this team is that now we did 5 deals last week, which in my zone is absolutely amazing. We've met our numbers 4 months ahead of the year, ahead of time." And this was a team that was not making its numbers at all. And our engagement numbers, that is the employees saying, "I'm not looking for another job. I like my manager."
Yeah.
In his 45 people in this bigger team had gone vertical.
Wow.
And HR came to him. So he's totally changed the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Totally changed the atmosphere. And HR came to him and said, "How did you do it?" And he said, "I talked to people." They didn't understand what he meant. So part of the power of that story, of course, he's got some power because he's moderately seen it, is that he's actually transformed that working environment, but he's also hit the jackpot commercially. These people are now highly motivated, feel empowered, and so forth. And it's because he loves people. That's the point, and he can't help it. And I remember saying to him, he wasn't really aware of the impact that he was having in that sense. And I said to him, "This is like Boaz. You're protecting your people like Boaz protects Ruth. You're praying for them. You're praising them as Boaz praises Ruth for her character, and you're providing. You're creating opportunities for them. In what certainly in Israel at that time it was a pagan. It was a degenerating environment in a difficult environment. Wow." So you've got things like that, and then you've got smaller things like, friends of mine who just get on the bus, really. They're retired people who get on the bus, and before they get on the bus, before they go down to the bus stop, they pray, "Lord, somebody talks to us, we'll talk back, and if they initiate a conversation, we'll give them something about Jesus." And their stories are amazing. They're not driven. It's not, "We've got to do this." It's just, "We're going on the bus, Lord." Lovely story of a woman called Victoria, who's 19 years old, apprentice, hairdresser.
Yeah.
And I love this story. So it's her first proper job other than a summer job, and she really wanted to work creatively with her hands, so she's chosen this career. And she's been in this job 4 weeks, whatever. And it's quite precious to begin with, lots to do, lots to learn. You got to make coffee, and you've got to make macchiatos and cappuccinos and flat whites and things with chocolate sprinkles on and all that kind of stuff. And she's feeling the pressure a bit, and her vicar prays for her. He commissions her into this job. And she said to me, "I've felt a lot more peace since then." And then I asked her this question. It's a completely unfair question, by the way.
Yeah.
I asked it in front of 300 people. And I have to believe, I hope that the Holy Spirit prompted this question, because if not, it's a really unfair question. So I asked her, "What difference does following Jesus make to the way you wash someone's hair?" And she said, "Well, I always pray for them as I massage in the conditioner." And I thought, wow.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you that she's changed that salon yet. I'm talking to her in about a month's time about how she's got on. Yeah. But to believe that God thinks that tiny thing is important. Yeah. So these things happen at variety of levels. You've got a policeman who changes the relational dynamics. You've got a banker who changes the relational and the commercial outcomes. And you've got somebody just blessing somebody who's in front of them, just trusting that God is going to answer that prayer somehow, and she may never know.
We had a guy come on Alpha who was a nurse and came to faith. And after about 9 months of coming to faith, his PA turned to him and said, something's changed in you. I mean, he was a heavy drinker, heavy smoker, swore heavily. And she said, covered in tattoos, she said, "What's changed in you?" He said, "Why?" She said, "You don't shout at me anymore like you used to do." This was his PA. And he said, becoming a follower of Jesus and realizing that my faith has to move into every area of my life. I hadn't realized, but it had started to move into the way that I behave in my workplace. And it was noticed by her. We had another guy at our church for a while who was an atomic bomb maker. That was his job. His job was to design how you got an atomic bomb into a place as quick and as fast and quietly as possible. Now, there's a whole load of ethics there, of which he became a Christian, and he was asking this question, should I stay in this line of work? And it was a good question for him to ask. But actually what he ended up doing, he did stay in that line of work, but he decided that he needed to be something transformative in it. And rather than just saying, I can't be in this, it's just too dark, he actually said, I want to lean in and bring light into it. And I think that is the life of a disciple, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, remember the beautiful story about Naaman, who encounters healing, and the prophet, and he says to Elijah, I'm going to go back and I'm going to have to be in this dark place where my king worships this other god. What do I do? And the prophet just says to Naaman, go in peace, go knowing you have God's presence with you in those dark places. And so often we have this mentality that says some places are too far gone. And what that says is darkness is bright, darkness is more powerful than the light. But actually the light that we carry within us, it's Jesus Christ, brings about transformation in these places. So we should go in peace into these workplaces or these areas of our lives that are dodgy, dark, odd, questionable, but we go in there knowing the transformative power of Jesus is within us. And that's what it's about, isn't it?
It is. That's a wonderful story. And of course, the Naaman story begins with a servant girl who's probably no more than 11 or 12 years ago, who's been captured, trafficked, if you like, not necessarily sexually or physically abused, but she's a slave. And she's the one who says to Naaman, if only my master would go and see the prophet who's in Samaria, then he would be healed. He says that to his wife. So that single sentence of that person who is on their own, probably isolated from Israel, outside the land, she so believes in the power of the God of Elisha that she sends her, the guy who took her captive, or at least the commander of the army that took her captive, to go to Israel. I mean, it's just the most amazing thing. And that one sentence, just to build on your story there, leads to, presumably, Naaman is the commander of the armies of Aram. Everybody would have known.
Mighty warrior, yeah.
Everybody would have known in Israel and in Aram. It is like, oh my goodness, we never know what one sentence, she says one sentence out of this heart of faith to do that. And I think you're right. And I think often when, people are often, we don't want to catastrophize work. Not all workplaces are difficult. No. Some are just delightful. And, some of the people are very kind and they send people birthday cards and they celebrate and give people lifts to the hospital. I mean, I've heard loads of companies like that. It's not all catastrophic. But I think one of the things that you're saying, and I really resonate with him in that story, is that in a way, God's put us somewhere, and in some deep sense, he's trusting us with it, asking us to look at it with his eyes. So I have a friend who teaches dance, and he was talking about this particular college that he's been in, and one or two of the very senior people are quite negative, quite critical. And it's a creative environment. You're trying to teach people, it's not necessarily the healthiest thing for a creative environment to have people who are very negative and picky. Excellence is good, but you're growing something in people. Yeah. God wants to grow things in people. And of course, that impacts him. Yeah. And at one level, you could say, well, he's thinking, well, should I leave? And at another level, he's going, but until I do, he's deliberately going around seeking ways to appropriately point out where talent has been manifested. If you know what I mean, where there's been good. He's taking responsibility in a way for that environment. And I think that's it. God, we're often in bad places and we ask, get us out. Yeah. Well, if the banker had said, get me out, which actually, by the way, he did, he wanted out. He was not happy there. He was praying to God a lot. I'm a banker, get me out of here. It's like, I don't want to be here. This is not pleasant. And then he realized that for this season, God had him there. He was trusting him with that. Yeah. And I think that's an important idea. Sometimes God trusts us to trust him to give us the resources to bring light. And in other areas of life, of course, we see that. We have a sick child or we a sick parent, or we're sick ourselves, and somebody, he's trusting us to continue to trust him in those difficult situations.
Can I end by asking you this then? We have disciples in workplaces, we have them in medical centres, we have them on buses, we have them in playgrounds, we have disciples in elderly care homes caring for their sick mother, parent. What would you want to say to every disciple as that kind of take-home message?
I would encourage everyone to have another disciple in their life who they've told about their context and who they continue to tell about their context so that they pray for them. I think the hard thing in church life is not that we don't, in good churches, that we don't have fellowship, but that we tend not to bring, if you like, the daily mission into the prayer conversation. We bring crisis into the prayer conversation. So if prayer is the heart of this, someone needs to be praying for you. Somebody needs to be praying for your mission where you are, and to know enough about it to be able to do that, not just in the crisis, but, I've got ongoing relationships and God has put this person on my heart. How's that going? We tend to do pressure point praying.
Yeah, that's good.
Not kingdom priority praying. So I think for every disciple, we all need someone to stand with us.
Mark, we found this particularly helpful at our church, Life on the Front Line. I think using this language of frontline we found particularly helpful. We've been talking a lot about this recently, about how we live out our lives in whatever is our front line. So I just want to recommend this as well to anybody watching. It's very helpful, particularly for small groups. But I actually used it on my own first before I used bits of it with our church. So I'd love to just recommend that. Mark, thank you for your time. I really appreciate spending this time with you. As I'm sure others will have done. So thank you so much. And I look forward to doing this again at some point in the future. So bless you.
Shalom to you. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.